Disney broke a lot of promises when making Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, and in the process, lost a lot of trust along the way, with the land noticeably missing characters that were promised, and with many fans agreeing that the land was themed after the wrong 3 movies. But for me personally, the #1 thing that was missing was kinetic energy. And this too was something that Disney had planned for but canceled in the 3rd attraction that would happen in Galaxy's Edge, the kinetic energy style attraction, a vibe ride, which is kind of my thing. Now the first 2 are a pretty easy fix, and Disney has been quickly trying to fix those, adding in more characters into the land, not nearly enough, and also breaking the silly timeline. Thank the maker. But the 3rd one seemed pretty complicated, pretty expensive, and pretty impossible until this last week. The station location is set, the land is built to accommodate the ride vehicle, introducing the giant creature to Galaxy's Edge is possible. What? I didn't know it went this far into development. I didn't know it was still possible. And if that's true, I had to solve this mystery. I also solved a couple of things in Star Wars Galaxy's Edge that never ever made sense to me until now. And one of those things that was the scale and size of the land speeder garage. Why is it sitting here, and why is it so big? And why did Disney only ever really use it once for a show on the media preview night? And since then, it's just been a giant stormtrooper prop. But with the general consensus that this was agreed to be the load and unload area for a 3rd attraction, makes so much sense, not only from the ground, but crazy sense later on when we look at it from above. If we look at all the different step-ups this building has, you can see that it goes from ground level, slowly working its way up to about 15 feet in the air. It also has room out front for an extended queue, but it's not hard to imagine how guests would have been able to snake their way back and forth through the front of this area right here to work their way up to the ridge where we would eventually load and unload on a Bantha-style creature. But first, let's talk about the vehicle or creature and why I don't believe it was meant to walk on the ground amongst us, why I think that is a little bit of Disney magic. Now, if we look at the concept art, we were led to believe that there would be an animal on the ground that we would be able to get onto and roam around, sharing the walkways with all the other guests in Batuu. And I don't think that's absolutely true. I think there's a half-truth in there. There's so many logistical reasons why that wouldn't work. Just think how backed up this land gets when one droid or Mando, Boba Fett, Kylo, Chewie walk through, and you're gonna put an elephant-sized animal in here? Never gonna work. Think about over at Radiator Springs when they have the cars out. When Lightning McQueen comes out, it takes a lot of logistics just to move the car to where it's gonna be stationary for 30 to 45 minutes. Imagine having to do that for something that's passing through every 12 to 15 minutes. It's not gonna work. There's not an actual walkway to accommodate it. You would need a very big circle to turn this beast around, and that circle doesn't really exist in a spot that makes sense when we go to both edges of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. So with most of the walkways being too narrow to accommodate the guests and the creature, and there not being areas to turn around, where would this go? But I think I have figured out exactly how this would work. You take one of these creatures and place it in front of the load-unload station. This particular creature would be called Ellie. She would be the one that is the most expensive, a very elaborate interactive prop where you can go up and engage with it, because essentially it's not a ride vehicle, it's a giant puppet. It's somewhere a Imagineer or engineer is puppeteering so that kids, adults, and guests of all ages can go up and have an interaction with this creature. But Ellie is out front to be sort of the mascot, if you will, for this attraction, because along the ridges of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge will be where the other Bantha-like creatures exist, and those would be the actual vehicles that we ride in. One's a prop to sell the story for all the other vehicles. Now, once we've established our load and unload station and what the vehicle is really like, let's break down how this would work, going from easiest at Disney's Hollywood Studios and working our way to most complicated here at Disneyland at Batuu West. This is the map that I created for the Florida design. As you can see, there's a massive extra overindulgent footprint that's been added on the other side of our load unload station. And it makes sense because Disney Hollywood Studios is much different than Disneyland in California. This park has a lot of extra room, but it also has a lot of extra guests and would need a much higher capacity than what would be needed at Disneyland. How it would work is this. We would load here at the station. We would cross over this opening in the walkway as we're gaining height to make our turn to reposition our vehicle so that we can get onto the circuit. We would then wander through the woods, which would probably have some fun props put inside of it, working our way on an adventure through the woods where we would eventually return to the load unload station. Pretty easy, not too complicated, but I think this starts to shed a little light onto something else that never made sense to me. Why is Disneyland and Disney Hollywood Studios almost identical except for a couple of subtle design differences? Let's look at the problem solving that would need to be done for Disneyland and we'll understand why. As keeping it all on one side of the land works wonderfully at Disney Hollywood Studios, this same concept on the West Coast has some pretty big problems. Here, you would start out the exact same way, at our load station, where we take off and go over the center tunnel, creating height to make our turn to enter into the main circuit of the attraction. But because our version is designed a little bit differently, here you'd get some extra shots looking at the third bonus tunnel, which is an exclusive to the West Coast version of Galaxy's Edge. But in this version, where we're working our way along the ridge of Batuu, there's a major problem. We would go down to the end of our path, we'd make a turn, and we would come back. Once being up on the edge of the ridgeline, and on the second pass being lower. But the entire time, you would always be able to see the track that you're not on. Therefore, ruining a lot of the magic, and also looking down and seeing another one of the bantha creatures go past you, just wouldn't have the same illusion as if you were on a path where you never saw any other paths or track. Now, because this didn't work, this led me to discovering several exciting things hidden inside of Disneyland and ultimately helping me understand why Disneyland is different than Hollywood Studios. And this difference is created due to creative problem solving when designing within constraint. This is one of those things that never made sense to me until now. When looking from above, look at this amazing straight alignment. This rock always seemed intentional to me, but I never quite could figure out what its purpose was. And then I realized it's an alignment with this gap. From the rock to the edge of this concrete wall behind me, I believe this is the home of the return bridge back to the loading station. And hit the card if you want to see what exists back here. I've already done it in another video. It's truly amazing. Another part of this puzzle that started to make sense, I'd always wondered why are the X-Wing fighters in two different locations from Disneyland to Disney Hollywood Studios. It always seemed kind of lazy to me that Disneyland had both of its aircraft just kind of sitting side beside each other. But now I understand why. The placement of where the X-Wing fighter is at Hollywood Studios would block the return path for the attraction to make its way back to the loading station. So I guess technically Disneyland's is in the wrong position to solve this problem. Another mystery is why such an elaborate exit building when everybody walks out and never looks back at it? Well, now I know. Guess we'll be looking at it. Now that we have all of our problem solving in place, we're ready to show the most optimal way that this attraction would work and why I think the land is designed the way that it is. The yellow line works just the same as the previous two that we've discovered, but with some major differences. Look at this cutout here hidden in the woods. Something was planned to go here. We load, we do the turn. Not to mention on this version, we have a look over into this courtyard, which is an exclusive to Disneyland, as this tunnel does not exist at Hollywood Studios. And we also have the unique second land bridge on the second tunnel. On this version, we ride the ridge all the way down the length of Galaxy's Edge. We are creating storytelling with people being able to see travelers going through the woods. We are creating layering as we are that outer edge of the land. And most importantly, we are that missing kinetic energy. Sometimes the attraction will disappear in parts of the dense forest, but other times it will become visible to add storytelling for all. Eventually, we cross over the main path, creating a fun moment for visitors walking into Galaxy's Edge for the first time, and then we begin to ride the Resistance Ridge. With a vehicle or character design that has force perspective built into it. As the little buckets that we ride in are at the top of the beast, everything is angled to make these rocks look taller and to add to the storytelling for everyone who's waiting to rise against the Resistance. Eventually, after working our way over and around the waterfalls, you cut around to a lower grade to miss the pre-show and ride on the outside of the unload building. Then we slowly climb our way up to a grade where you work your way across a muddy, shaky looking bridge built by the locals to get back to Ellie and the stables where other guests are waiting their turn to ride the attraction. This land has subtle differences in it that makes this circuit absolutely possible. All of these are predictions based on a relative amount of real-world clues, but they are still predictions and should inspire you to dream along with us. If you enjoyed this look at what could be with Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, make sure you watch this video right here, where I designed a fireworks show that takes perfect use of all the spires behind me. Friends, Brickey here from the edge of Galaxy's Edge.